So just like to say hello and welcome to everybody to the biodiversity event. It's part of the Heatons Climate Action Festival, funded by Sustainable Living in the Heatons and Stockport Local. My name is Paul Lawis. I'm the chair of Sustainable Living in the Heatons, and that's my phone, which I didn't turn off. Now, before we start, can I just go through the housekeeping notes? Only our speakers and panelists have the ability to use their microphone, so you'll notice that other than the panelists, you're all muted. So you can clap, cheer, do what you like. I won't hear it, which is probably a good thing. Questions at the bottom of the screen, if you haven't used it before, there are a few. If you put your mouse over it, you'll see there's participants, Q&A, chat, etc., etc. We have the Q&A button for you to ask questions as we go along. If you do that, we can try and pick them up on the day, or if not, we'll answer them later on. And that's the place for when we do a little panel section. We'll do a panel at the end where we'll answer questions from yourself. So while we're going along, if you think of some questions, put them in the Q&A bit and we'll pick that up. We also have a little quiz, so that's what we call polls. So you'll know when it's coming up. If you can get involved in that, see if you know the answer to the questions, that'd be great. And then there's the chat screen, which is next to it, the chat button. If you click on that, you can share thoughts and ideas or comments that you might have, and we'll have a look at them. But it's the Q&A bit that will be quite useful as well. And afterwards, the webinar that we're doing today will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, and you can pick it up again later if you want to. Okay, so why are we doing this? SLH has been around for around 10 years now, and we've been looking at ways we can make a difference to the Heatons. We've tried to make Heatons a better place to live, work and play. We've organised lots of different events over that time, and more recently some of us have become more concerned that we're not addressing the big issues. Climate change is happening whether we like it or not, and at a great pace. And the likes of David Attenborough, Greta Thunberg have all raised their voices. They've expressed the urgency that's required. And this affects us all whether we like it or not. And despite this urgency, change is not happening fast enough. We all worry that our leaders are not acting fast enough and not making big enough changes to solve the problem. This makes us all wonder what we can do to make a difference. And what will the changes we make really make a difference? Will they really make a difference? What's the point? We recognise that change is difficult, but change is necessary now more than ever. We can either despair or do something about it. So we say, don't despair. Look at what you can do as individuals, as local businesses, and within our local community to influence and make change happen. And just to let you know, before I move on, we have our own YouTube channel, which I mentioned before. So please go back and pick up on any other events you've missed, or rerun this event or any other event you like. And if you've enjoyed what you see, share it on social media, tell your friends and neighbours. So here we are. This is the inaugural Heatons Climate Action Festival 2020. So what's it all about? The festival is here to help ask the question, what more can I do to make a difference? And offer lots of usable and practical and fun answers. We also want to set up legacy events afterwards, and to do this we need your feedback and input. Please keep in touch and take part in polls and Q&As as they happen. Make the most of the festival, go to as many events as you can, ask questions, be curious, but most of all, have fun, enjoy. Okay, so this event is all about wildlife in the Heatons, and it comes under the category of biodiversity. So why is the biodiversity important? Well, the more biodiversity there is, the stronger an ecosystem is, because small changes will have less of an effect on its stability. Now, this all sounds very complicated, and I guess it can be if you don't understand it. So what simple things can we do to help? And this is what we're going to do today. Well, we can start by connecting with nature. Get out there and observe, take time to look and listen, reconnect with nature and the wildlife around you. Look at your own garden or your living space. Is it the best it can be for wildlife? And by that I mean not just the birds, the badgers, the hedgehogs. It's all about the smaller creatures as well. The insects, such as spiders and beetles and ants, and even microbes in the soil. There is more life in a handful of soil than there are people on Earth. That takes some getting used to, doesn't it? 50 billion of minute bacteria alone. The saying is, if you look after the soil, the rest will take care of itself. But more than that, we need to educate the next generation as well. They are the ones that will have to put right the huge mistakes and the mess that we've made. So, where can we go to look at wildlife in the Heatons? And what can you find? Well, today we have 3 local people who can help with that. First of all, we have Amelia Adamson, who is a young Heatonian and an ecologist, here to talk about the wildlife that there is in the Heatons and what signs to look for. At the end of her particular presentation, we'll have a quiz, as I mentioned before. So look out for it and participate. Then we have a gentleman called Jeff Clark. He lives locally and is an ecologist and an experienced and passionate naturalist. He will talk about the bats you can find in the Heatons. Sadly, he can't be with us, but his presentation is absolutely superb, and I think you'll get a lot out of it. And then, last but not least, we have Dave Higginson-Tranter, who is part of Signpost, a local charity, who have been supporting carers for over 30 years. I can say that he's truly knowledgeable and an enthusiastic naturalist, and will talk through some videos he's made of the Heatons wildlife. He's an absolute star, and I'm sure you'll enjoy them. And then we will have the answers and questions from the participants. So have a think as we go along the questions you might want to ask them. So, without more ado, shall we crack on? So first, we've got Dave's first video, which he will just quickly introduce, and we'll crack on with it. Dave, over to you.
Hey up, Fungal Punk Dave here, and I've done a few videos. I've been requested to do a few videos around the Heatons. I live in Cheadle, but I work at the Heatons Centre, where we deal with young and old carers, doing a bit to keep them motivated, give them a bit of respite, and just keep them on the right side of sanity. They're a good bunch. Like I said, they range from a tower end. I work for young carers, so we go from 6 years up to 25, and then the adult side go from 25 all the way up to whenever. We've got one guy who's helping out at our garden club at the moment, where we're trying to build some wildlife habitat around the Heatons Centre, and he's 87. By heck, he don't half get stuck in. But it's just lovely to get these people together doing a bit, and it just kind of highlights that even people of such long years have missed quintessential wonders at the feet, which is a tragedy in some respects, because if you don't know something's there, it's going to get neglected. So all the things I do, leading mushroom walks, insect walks, going out taking pictures, doing these Zoom meetings and taking young carers out to old carers, I'm always mooching about doing something. It's all geared to one thing, just to sharing and getting people looking at things which are important. So this first video I did, when I go on my walks in my dinner break, I'm always pootling around the Heatons. So there's a spot at back of some plots near Pipistrelle School, big open field. I usually potter along there looking at nettle beds and just any old vegetation, have a look at the fields. And I'm always got my eye looking at something, and I'm always listening at something. The important thing is that everything I see I record, and it goes on a national database. The idea about this thinking is it will get places on the map, and people say, well, look at this. They've got this there, this there, this there. Ideally, then they shouldn't be building on it. I say ideally because, as we know, the way the government is, it's trashing everything. But we need to stand up and do more and resist and record and get things noted and essentially get our kids looking, because it's their future we're dabbling with here. In 20, 30 years' time, I'll most probably be dead and gone. But what about these kids? It's selfish just to think, well, it won't. The end of time won't be happening in my lifetime. We're very close to the end times, as David Attenborough on TV tonight will be telling you. So just to get out and raise a bit of an awareness and get a new army of young green folk doing the bit, and old folk as well doing a bit more. We should all be just trying. So the first video was a quick snippet at back of the plant plots on a field near Pipistrelle School.
Another video for the Climate Festival, and this one, just a general one. I see so many people walking on this open area near Pipistrelle School, and so many people walking about and seeing nothing, which is an absolute tragedy. And if you don't see anything, you tend to let it be neglected, and that is just not on for me. You need to take notice and have a look what's around you. Just around the periphery here, many people just consider it an hedgerow, just a bit of waste ground. It's not. It's a hive of activity and life-giving essence. There's butterflies, what live along there, small tortoiseshells, specklewoods, peacocks, red admirals. Along that hedgerow at the far end, right over there, I once did a walk along there and counted over 300 common green shield bugs sunbathing. There's overflies aplenty, spiders, little mirrored bugs weaving about. There's nettle beds with all larvae on. This field in front of me here, it's got wood pigeons feeding on, and starlings and magpies. In winter you get herring gulls, lesser blackback gulls, common gulls, black-headed gulls, and people are just walking around and not seeing. This is a source of life for so many things, and it's also a source of life for us. And if we neglect these small places, then we're absolutely doomed. So we need to look after them, respect them. The best way to do that, get out, take your time, breathe in what's going on and appreciate the beauty which is scurrying around and living and thriving and helping us to have a better existence. It's precious, precious things. So look after your wildlife. There's a little parakeet, there he is, screaming above, ring-necked parakeet. Look after your wildlife, look after your environment, and most of all, respect it. Another video.
Hi, so my name's Amelia Adamson. I'm going to do a quick talk about what you sort of signs of wildlife you can look for and what you can do to help wildlife from home. So if you start the presentation, go next. Yeah, so my talk is called How to Be an Ecologist in Your Back Garden. So next, please. So my name's Emmy. I've lived in Heatons since I was about 11 years old. I now live in Sheffield. I moved there for university to study biology, and I now live here working as an ecological consultant. My job basically means that we go to sites that are going to be developed on or built on or demolished, and we go and survey for the plants and animals and see if there's anything that needs protecting from the impacts of the development. So when I was younger, I always loved nature and animals. I've included these pictures, which are all pictures of me as a kid, and I was always looking for the nearest animal, going on rock pools on holiday, like trying to ride the horses, whatever. I didn't realise like quite how much that would transfer into my job as an adult. But yeah, next slide, please. So I knew growing up that I wanted a job with animals. I thought at the time that would be like a zookeeper or something, but I didn't realise that ecology existed as a career. I first got into it as an idea in uni. I was doing some volunteering, and we were basically doing surveys of the campus and finding what animals lived around the uni campus. And that kind of got me introduced to some survey techniques and realised that I could do that as a job. I really like my job because it makes me feel like I'm a detective for animals, which is why we named the session this. Because it's like you're looking for clues, looking for evidence, trying to find out what animals lived where, which is really fun. And I get to help animals every day at work, which I feel like is my small way of doing something for the planet. So if you're like me and you love animals and nature and plants, and you want to make a difference and help save them, maybe you could go into ecology, but you don't have to do it as a career. You can do your part to protect vulnerable species from home as well. So in this talk, I'm going to go through some things you can do to look for local animals in your park and garden, and what you can do to help protect vulnerable species as well. Next. So first place you might go looking for animals and signs of them is in the park. So one of the main things you can go and look for is holes. It's quite fun to go and find a hole and try and work out what animal has lived there. So the first thing you can do is look at the shape of the hole. If you see this top left one is a badger hole, and they're quite wide and short, and then they have this kind of D shape with a flat bottom. That's quite characteristic of a badger hole. And then you've got a foxhole at the bottom, which is a lot taller and thinner. And if you think of the shape of a badger versus the shape of a fox, you can kind of see that in the hole. And then you've got rabbit holes, which the most common ones you'll find. They're a lot smaller. You'll probably see quite a few holes in one place because they like to build warrens. And then there's other evidence you can look for to try and work out what species the hole belongs to, which I'll show you in the next slide. So badgers usually dig out a large amount of soil from the holes, and then you've got these big piles next to the holes called spoil heaps. They also might drag bedding out, so it would be usually dry grass that they drag out of the hole that they've been sleeping on. And then if there's trees near a hole, you might find scratches. Badgers like to sharpen their claws and scratch the trees nearby. But the best way you can work out whether a badger has been in a hole or not is looking at the entrance to the hole if there's hairs on the ground. If there's black and white hairs and you kind of like roll them between your finger, they're triangular in shape, so they won't roll along your finger. And that's like, if you've got one of those, there's definitely badgers living in the hole. So that's really interesting because they're protected by law as well. So it's really important to make sure that we're protecting them. Other things you can find in the park are, on the next slide, you might have a pond. So if you've got a pond nearby, if there's rocks, or especially if it's a moist environment, if there's rocks or pieces of wood, you can lift them up and you might find little frogs or toads underneath there. I used to love doing that as a kid in the park, or even in like friends' gardens. I'd always go picking up the rocks, trying to see if there was any frogs underneath there. Newts as well, especially if you can go to a pond at night time, especially in like April time, you might see newts swimming around the pond. You might see them walking across the grass to get to the pond, which is really cool to see. So if you have the opportunity to go to a pond at night in like April time, you should do it. Another thing you might find in your local park on the next slide is if you've got a river or a stream in your park, you might find otter or watervole evidence, which is really cool because they're a bit harder to come by. So if you think of the like badger hole, but next to a watercourse, and then they would usually have a path down into the water, that would be an otter holt. And then they prefer kind of grassy banks with flowing water, but really otters can use any river. And if you're looking for water vole, they have a lot smaller holes, and they kind of have these lawns around the hole where they graze on the grass, and then they leave these little lawns cut at a 45-degree angle. So if you find those, that's really characteristic of a water vole. It's not just in parks that you can go looking for. You can also go looking at home. So the easiest animal to look out for from home is bats. They roost in trees, but most commonly in buildings. If you look at a building and there's bits of tile missing, there's cracks in tiles, there's bits of mortar missing, any sort of gap in a building that creates a small hole, bats could utilise and roost inside. So I've found personally the best place to find bats is just outside your house. So in summer, sit outside in the garden at sunset, and then you'll start to see bats flying around. Maybe they might come out of a house nearby, they might just be commuting past to go and forage somewhere. So that's really interesting. I often point them out to friends as well when I'm sitting outside. If you go on the next slide, it's not just in your house that you can see them. You can go and find an open field, and then you might find noctules, which are the largest bats, and also water sources. So if you're by a river, water attracts insects, insects attract bats, so you might find bats. If you go to dark areas, because bats don't really like artificial light, so yeah, if you find a dark park, you might see them foraging around trees and stuff, so that's also places you can find bats. Next slide, please. So I've talked through a few things you can do to try and find animals in your local area, but I'm also going to talk through some ways you can enhance your garden to help protect animals. So one of them is building an insect hotel. Yes, there's loads of guides online for how to do this, or you can go to workshops. And basically you want a variety of materials. So you can use bricks with holes in, twigs, branches, hollow bamboo sticks, even things I've seen people use like old toilet roll rings. So anything that you can put together to enhance it for insects would then also bring more wildlife to your garden. So insects would pollinate plants, and then that will attract other things. And you can plant pollinator friendly species. You can also plant native plants in your garden to enhance it for wildlife. So leave an area of your grass to grow long and put some wildflower seeds down, and then you can get a little wildflower garden which would attract insects. And you can plant native plants, ones with berries would attract birds. Any native plants really would increase the biodiversity of your garden. Next slide. If you're lucky enough to, you could install a pond in your garden. If you have a pond, put a pile of rocks or wood and some long grass around it. That will offer more cover, and then you've got more amphibians likely to use your pond because they'll have more protection from predators there. And finally, you can enhance your garden for bats. Next slide. Yeah, so the best thing to bring bats to your garden is to avoid artificial lighting. So maybe if you have a lamp outside, have it on a sensor or a dimmer, so you don't have it always lit up, and then bats are more likely to use your garden. And then you can also get bat boxes, so you can buy these for I think you can get them for like 20 or 30 pounds, or you can get crafty and make them. So yeah, I hope that's kind of given you some ideas of ways you can go out looking for wildlife or help your garden attract more wildlife. I'm just going to go through my quiz now. It's just 5 questions. Some of them I've covered in this talk, some of them I haven't. It doesn't matter if you don't get them right, it's just a bit of fun. It's 5 questions, they're quite easy. So the first one is, where are you most likely to find bats? A, buildings, B, trees, C, water bodies, or D, all of the above? You should just be able to vote on the screen.
Okay, a couple more to vote and then I'll stop.
So most people got it right. It was all of the above. The next question is, what is the UK's largest carnivorous mammal? This wasn't covered in the presentation, but I thought I'd include it. So you've got A, red deer, B, fox, C, badger, or D, dog.
Okay, just a few more people to vote.
The answer is badger, so that was pretty close. So this one, I'm not really expecting anyone to know the Latin name for a common toad, but I just like the question because they're all the same word repeated twice, and these are all British animals. So we've got, what's the Latin name of a common toad? A, Meles meles, B, Lutra lutra, C, Pipistrellus pipistrellus, and D, Bufo bufo.
Okay, just a couple of more seconds. People not as sure on this one.
Oh yeah, it was Bufo bufo, so yeah, most people got it right. Fourth question is, how many species of bat are there in the UK? A, 10, B, 16, C, 20, or D, 25?
A few more people to vote.
The answer is 16. And finally, what's the largest species of newt in the UK? A, smooth newt, B, palmate newt, C, grey-crested newt, or D, alpine newt?
I'm going to call it back on this one for the audience. You lost the last one. A few more people to vote.
Yeah, that was an easy one. So that's the end of my presentation. I hope you took something from it and go and look in your park for some wildlife. This is a picture from a newt translocation I did. We found like 200 great-crested newts in one survey, so that's pretty cool.
Thanks, Amelia. That's brilliant. There's some really useful information in there. How did you get on with the quiz? I wasn't as good as I thought I'd be. I got Bufo right, and I got the great-crested newt right. But other than that, I was pretty poor, to be honest. But there we go. Amelia will be back later on for the Q&A later. So now's time for us to go to Dave's second video. So Dave, if you'd just like to just quickly introduce it and move on, that'd be brilliant.
Which one was it? Was it one under oak tree?
Yes, indeed.
Underneath the oak tree, I was at the side of Torkington Park, just at the back of where I work. I'm a great believer in micro-habitats. So pick a specific plant, have a good rummage and mooch about and see what you can come up with. And it's amazing what each little individual micro-habitat holds. So nettles, obviously my favourite. I've wrote a book on nettles, and I'm just fascinated by mooching around in nettles and seeing what bugs and fungi and everything lives in there, and the good medicinal properties. I'm just doing a book on silver birch, which I'll spend all next year pootling around silver birch trees and seeing what I can find. But for the next video, I was hanging around underneath an oak tree. Now, oak trees, they've been well documented as holding lots of life. And oh man, you can spend days and days pootling throughout the year, looking at the leaves and the bark and around the base of the tree, see what fungi are popping up. So there's a whole host of different species and all complexities of life going on. So this next one was I think it was a windy morning, only a couple of weeks ago, and the missus got a phone out and did a quick video of me waffling on.
Another video for the Heatons Climate Festival, and I'm next to Thornfield Park. You hear a carrion crow calling in the background. Little blackbird there, I heard, chirping. And I am looking at this oak tree. Fantastic trees, oak trees, and ones you should pay great homage to. They do so much good. The amount of life they hold is fantastical. And just this big, beautiful oak tree above me. If you want to pan up and have a look. There's squirrels in there and birds and insects. But one thing I have noticed, if I can find them, on these leaves that many people overlook, are these spangle galls. Neuroterus quercus bacarum. Little gall wasps create these growths. Inside, little larvae live and come out and make a new cycle next year and just keep all the activity going. And just add to the diversity of the tree. Oak trees are great for galls. There's absolutely oodles of them you can look at. So if you just spend a bit of time looking at a good oak tree, you can just see so much from these lovely plants. We've got nettles around the base here for a bit more interest, and also growing nearby, just over there, small balsam, little yellow flower in the distance. So just at the side of a park here, we also find on the compost, somebody threw over there, I found some earth star fungi, very special fungi like little puff balls. So there's all things going on, and when you get high wind you get branches falling down from right up there, and you can even look at them and find fungi and lichens and all things you wouldn't normally have access to. So spend a little time looking at these oak trees that are keeping us all alive and doing such a good job keeping the earth clean. Another video.
Okay, everybody, that was brilliant from Dave. Thank you for that. Now, moving on, we've got Jeff Clark. Now, he's an ecologist and an educator, and he's put together a fabulous presentation on bats in the Heatons. Now, sadly, he couldn't be with us today, so he's recorded this specially for us. And I know there's a question, I think, from Gabrielle came through, asking where you can find bats in the Heatons. Well, hopefully this will help answer that question for you. Okay, without more ado, over to the presentation.
Welcome to the bats of the Heatons. The Heatons are well treed, there's lots of water bodies around, and generally the gardens are well stocked, so it's a good place to find bats. In this presentation, we'll not only find out where to find them, we'll find out a little bit about each species that you can possibly anticipate finding, and we'll also be looking at some of the things that may concern you at various times. Say you've found an injured bat and you want to know what to do with it, or maybe you want to get a little bit more interested in bats and take things further, and we'll show you how to do that as well. Welcome to. There are known to be over 1,100 species of bats in the world. However, in the UK, we're somewhat impoverished, as we only have 18 species in general. And in the Heatons area, we're even more restricted. Something like 10 species could be anticipated as being found in a given year. Of course, you're not going to see all of those different species on any given night in any one locality within the Heatons. You're going to have to look a little bit harder. And so now we'll try and find out how it is that you actually find bats and where to look as well. All of the UK bat species are known to be insectivores, and if that's the case, then the best place to go looking for them is always going to be where there are congregations of insects that they will prey on, whether it's mosquitoes or midges or moths in certain cases. And we have some excellent habitats for that kind of thing within the Heatons area. In particular, the River Mersey, especially those sections that are heavily wooded, are going to be superb places to look for bats. Bats in the UK use echolocation to detect their prey, usually mosquitoes, maybe midges, and certainly the ponds around the Heatons are fantastic places to go looking for that because they generate a lot of insects. However, every pond is not the same. Ponds with clear surfaces are by far the best and most attractive to bats because their echolocation works effectively there. Ponds with a covering of duckweed tend to be poorer, the reason being that the duckweed absorbs the echolocation calls and makes detection of prey much more complicated, so the bats tend to avoid those areas. In your own gardens, you may have perfect spaces where bats will congregate because there's a kind of amphitheatre setting, or a local parkland may contain the same features. Always look for these sorts of locations with flying areas where insects congregate. That's where you'll maximise your opportunities. It was the early 1980s before bat detectors became generally available to the public. Until then, it was the province of universities, specialist sound engineer departments, and specialists using this very expensive kit. Thankfully, the stuff we have is not expensive, relatively speaking. A couple of £100 will get you a decent bat detector. You can take it out anywhere within the Heatons area and certainly be able to pick up several different species of bat in most good localities. And you'll even be able to identify those species of bat with your detector. Well, certainly to a degree, shall we say. Have a listen to the sound on this particular slide of a common Pipistrelle. This is the sort of thing that you'll hear through a bat detector. The common Pipistrelle does what it says on the tin. It is in general our commonest bat, and it's certainly the one that most of you, if you're seeing bats in and around your gardens, this is the species that you're going to be seeing and detecting, maybe with your own little bat detector. Common Pipistrelle's a tiny little thing, might be weighing around about 5 grams, and it certainly looks large because the wingspan is relatively great in comparison to the actual animal itself, but really this thing is tiny, smaller than a mouse. And what is more, it's a real avid eater of mosquitoes and other small midges and things like that, so can easily consume about 1,000 of these things in a night. So they are really something to be thankful for and not something to be feared. Most bat detectors won't show you a picture effectively of the sounds that the bat is producing. This is because this is a full spectrum and a bat walkabout, a very, very expensive piece of kit. It's still available to you to buy. It'll cost you about £1,600, but it does actually show you the shape of the sound file, if you like, that is produced by the bat. And in a common Pipistrelle's case, it's peaking at around about 45 kilohertz, and it also looks like the shape of a hockey stick. And that's one of the distinctive features of it and one or two of its sibling species. Individual bats and individual species can produce all kinds of different sounds. They've all got different functions. Those hockey stick ones we talked about before were simply about the bat finding its way around. Whereas on this particular image on the Anabat walkabout, you can see these strange sort of fuzzy pictures a little bit lower down, around about the 30 kilohertz, 20 kilohertz mark, and they're actually social calls. They've got a different function to the flight calls. They're all about giving a message to fellow bats. It could be aggressive. It could be saying, I'm ready to breed. It could be all kinds of different things. But these are referred to as social calls. So one of the fascinating things about the UK is it's so well studied for its natural history. We know so much about what we have here in the UK, but bats really do demonstrate that we also know remarkably little when we think we know a lot. It was only when the bat detector became commonly available, and so we're talking about this, let's say the 1980s, that it was suddenly realised that the common Pipistrelle probably wasn't just one species. It turned out to be at least 2 species, and one of them became known as the Soprano Pipistrelle. And that's because the bat detector showed that the bats were calling at a different frequency. And when they actually captured the bats, they also found that there were one or two physical features showing a little bit of a difference. But the Soprano Pipistrelle has been and always has been a common bat in the UK, just was not realised it was a true species. And in fact, by the time you get up to Scotland, it's probably the commonest bat in that region. And here's the difference between a common pipistrelle and a Soprano Pipistrelle demonstrated on the Anabat walkabout. Sound picture file, if you like, because this bat is clearly peaking up around about, well, it's close to 60 in this case, but generally it's around about 55 kilohertz, whereas the common pipistrelle peaks at 45 in its general call. And so the bat detectors clearly showed a difference, and that's what led people to finally find out that there were two species and not just one. So I guess most of you are probably not going to go out and actually buy a bat detector. But that doesn't mean to say you can't find evidence of bats in and around your own home. For instance, if you look on your walls or on your windowsills especially, underneath the soffits, you may find small dark objects. These are droppings from bats. Now they look a bit like a mouse dropping, but if you give them a quick roll or a squeeze, if you like, they'll tend to be very fibrous and break apart because they're made of the chitinous material that's made up of insect bodies. And so they fall apart. Whereas if you do that to a mouse poo, then it's going to be fairly solid and fairly hard. And so you know that you're not looking at a bat dropping. But the bat droppings may indicate that you've got a bat roost in your property. So have a look around. You may be lucky and have a bat roost right above your soffits. The Noctule Bat is one of our largest bats and therefore relatively easy to spot, particularly as it likes to come out really early in the dusk period, and you won't need a bat detector, partly because it's so big, but also because it likes to fly high above a canopy or above a tall grassland area. And what's more, if you're young, you may even be able to hear it because its calls are quite low frequency, somewhere around 20 kilohertz. You may just pick that up. Unfortunately, if you're like me and in your 40s and 50s, then you're probably not going to be able to hear it, but you're certainly going to be able to see it. The brown long-eared bat is a really lovely looking thing, got fantastic ears, and those ears are specialist because they've got such fine hearing. They are a real dainty specialist bat that likes to live within what you would think of as a cavity, not a crevice. So this is a bat that's often associated with barns or big open loft spaces. And it's a beautiful bat, as I mentioned, a very gentle face looking thing, and it's got perfect hearing. Those massive ears are like parabolic reflectors. Of all the British bats, I think brown long-eared bat is probably the most adept at finding insects on foliage and picking it off with ease. It's known as the whispering bat because its calls are so quiet, but if you get to watch one in a canopy working around trying to find insects, it'll hover above a leaf and then it'll just dip down and pick one quietly off a leaf. It's got perfect flight control and it's got a supreme echolocation. I mentioned that the brown long-eared is sometimes referred to as the whispering bat. Even with really sophisticated equipment like the walkabout that you see here, it's quite hard to pick up. You've got to be within about 5 meters before you actually hear the call through the detector. And then its signature looks very distinctive, especially when you compare it against that one made by the hockey stick arrangement of the Pipistrelles. This one looks like a broken call. And so quite distinctive when you do actually pick it up. It peaks generally around about 30 kilohertz, somewhere around there. And it's usually a bat that's strongly associated with wooded areas. It's also a bat that likes cavities, so it's one that you associate with barns rather than with crevices. But a bat that you associate with loft spaces rather than under tiles. Within the UK, there are a group of bats that are usually just referred to as Myotis bats. They're all myotid species. There's several different species in the UK. And the reason we've referred to them as Myotis bats because even with specialist bat detecting equipment, it's not always possible to work out exactly which species is which. As it happens in this particular image, the bat on the left is a Brandt's bat, and it's usually referred to as a bat preferring riparian habitat. So I remember I talked about the River Mersey, those wooded sections, that's where to look for it. And the whiskered bat on the right looks almost identical. I mean, the only way you can actually tell them apart, really, is by looking at the dentition. So almost impossible to work out sometimes which bat species you're actually looking at, even with sophisticated equipment. Natterer's bat is a member of the Myotis tribe. It's slightly larger than whiskered and also Brandt's bats, but it's slightly different as well in the sense that rather than being a cavity species, it's more likely to be found roosting in a loft space or in a barn. You will find it within the Heatons area, often around water bodies. Daubenton's bat, a Myotis species, is a bit different to many of the species in the UK. Although many bats will go around water bodies, this one is strongly associated with water bodies. It will skim very low to the surface, taking small insects from the surface itself, or even small fish that are very close to the surface. Daubenton's bat, even though it's a Myotis species, does at least produce a rather distinctive sound signature. If you look on the spectrogram here, you can see these rather curvaceous, sinuous lines produced by the bat as it skims low over the water. If you'd like more information about bats, whether it's in the Heatons or in the UK, the best place to visit initially will be the Bat Conservation Trust website. You can see the address displayed here. If you'd like to know more about bats in your local area around the Heatons, and if you'd like to get involved with bat recording, then your best resource is going to be the South Lancashire Bat Group website. You can see the address displayed here. If you come across an injured bat, the best thing to do is to contact the local bat workers, and to do that, go to the website for the South Lancashire Bat Group. You'll find details are on there.
Okay, everybody. Right, we're at the point now of the question and answer session. I just want to mention, I hope you enjoyed that video. It was particularly interesting, I thought. Fascinating stuff. The one thing he probably didn't answer was where in the Heatons you could probably see them. I know there's Mersey, you can walk down the Mersey River and see some bats around there, so we might pick that up if we've got time. Okay, so we don't have a huge amount of time. We've got quite a few questions come in, which is great news. So we'll keep the questions as brief as possible, if that's okay. I'll hand over to Alex, and she'll put the questions to Amelia and Dave.
Right, so here we go with some questions. So this one is for Emmy from Ian. So you look at flora and fauna that is about to be destroyed by development. Do you get the chance to put the animals first and stop the habitat being built on?
So it's kind of a depressing answer, but not really, because basically our job is to do what we can to help the animals, and it can often mean that they have to do a lot of things to avoid impacting them. So especially now a lot of local planning authorities want a biodiversity net gain as a result of a development, which oftentimes means they have to enhance the site a lot in order to compensate for the amount that they're taking away as a result of development. So that's really good, and that will become law at some point. But often if there's like bats living in a building, it's very rare that we'd ever say, no, you can't do it. There's always a way to kind of, if there's a roost, you would apply for a license and remove the bats and build an alternative roost. There's nearly always a way to kind of compensate or mitigate for the loss. So it's very rare to actually say, no, there's no way you can go ahead with this development. The only thing I think is ancient woodlands. I'm pretty sure you're not allowed to get rid of them. So I think that's like the main one. And also if it's on a designated site that's been like legally protected for wildlife, then it can be really hard to get planning permission and stuff. But yeah, a lot of our job is just finding a way to allow them to go ahead with the development while having the least impact possible on the animals.
That's great, thank you. So this question is for Dave from Diana. Now I know this was answered in the chat box, but I'm going to ask it so everyone can hear it. So Dave mentioned parakeets in the Heatons. They're not indigenous. Should we be concerned about seeing more of them around?
Dave, you're not muted. You're muted. That's it.
Is that okay? Can you hear me? Yeah. To the parakeets, no. I think they're a nice addition to our native wildlife, and it's not their fault they're doing okay and surviving. So why punish something for doing all right and having a splash of colour? If they get in mass numbers, of course, then you have to do worry. But there's polite ways of dealing with things, like they do with Canada geese. Instead of blowing them out at sky, just puncture their eggs, keep the numbers down. But these parakeets have been in the Manchester area for absolutely ages. Now they're moving about, but there's no great numbers, is there? You know, a couple here, a couple there. What wonderful things to hear squawking about and flashing about like an hawk. Great stuff, you know, why not?
Thanks, Dave. So this one is for Emmy from Sarah. So Sarah has seen a newt in the pond. Do you have a suggestion for how to identify which species it is?
Yeah, so there's only 3 native newts. So it's generally quite easy to identify them. If it's a great crested newt, which are the like rare and protected ones, it will be quite easy to tell because they're much larger, and then they've got like an orange belly with spots on, which is quite characteristic. And then you can tell if it's a male if it's got a silver stripe along the tail, and then if it's a small newt, it's most likely to be a palmate or a smooth newt. Again, I think the male has a stripe along the tail, but I can't remember from the top of my head. But yeah, if you Google it, UK newt identification, there'll be loads of things online which have guides to help you identify them as well. Because there aren't that many species, it's quite easy to find the resources you need.
Great, thank you. And this one is for Dave from Sheila. So where is the best place to put a bat box and how high up should it be?
Oh, bats. I mean, ideally, plonk it in a tree, a nice vegetated tree, so they can swoop in and out. And what you're looking for is safety for the bat box and obviously near a good food source. So if you've got a tree and you've got a pond, common sense, isn't it? You can go. Well, there's various heights. I mean, as high as an house, they'll go to, but not more lower than, I'd say, about 10 feet. They're better off up there so no tinkers can destroy the box or whatever, and then swoop in and out and do the feeding.
Great, thank you. So this one is for both of you. What's your favourite British animal and why?
Can you hear me? Yeah, every one of them. Every single one. I love them all. There's nothing better than going out from a blade of grass to a big flower to a butterfly to a bird. I love them all. If I can put a name to them, I like them even better. Some things you can't name, you know, but what's my favourite? Well, no, I like them all. Everything. It's great.
I was going to say bats, but I think your answer is actually better because I can't really beat that answer of all of them.
Bats are good. Bats are good. But
yeah,
in
terms of I like, as much as I go and do bat surveys for work, every time I'm out in the park or walking anywhere at sunset and I see bats fly over, I always stop and look at them. And people are always like, "You do that every day for work? Do you not get bored of looking at them?" I'm like, "Nope."
No, yeah, great stuff.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Okay, so that's as much time as we've got for questions. So thank you ever so much for putting your questions forward. Thanks to the panel. We've got a couple that we couldn't get to, and what we'll do is we'll try and answer them either offline for you. I know there was one from Ian about if there was any cheaper or more affordable bat monitors you could get. So we might get to that one either tomorrow or after the event. Okay, so thank you for that. I hope everyone found that very useful. We're going to finish off with Dave's final video. I'm surprised I didn't mention fungi before, but here we go. This is the one about St Paul's Church and the fungus you can find around there. Dave.
Fungi. If you see an aging old punker, grubby and mooching around, looking at the ground, it's me, and I'm looking for fungi. I'm not a professional at anything really. I got dragged into fungi a long time ago. I turned up on a mushroom walk. The guy who was leading it didn't turn up, and the ranger said, "Well, I do it," because he knew me. He knew I was interested in these things. I really didn't want to do it, but I did. And then someone said, "Will you do one for me? And will you do one for me?" And I got dragged down the fungus route. I'm not complaining. It's a wonderful thing, but by heck, it can drive you bananas, and they're everywhere. Fungi are absolutely everywhere. To date, well, I did a mushroom walk yesterday. That was my 330th walk I've led. And I'm always at it. I've got cow dung in the fridge, a couple of specimens in the fridge to look at, and I'm always mooching with fungi. Without fungi, everything will die. They are the basic key to life, and they're holding everything together. So a good place I found in the Heatons is St Paul's Church. The wax caps what come up there, as they do on the lawn outside the Heaton Centre, are indicative of untreated natural grassland. Heaton Moor, I'm sure at some point, was a moorland, and perhaps these are traces of what it once was. So sometimes it's quite sad when I see these things, because I think all these houses now are up and it's becoming too much concrete spilling everywhere, and we're losing these green spaces, and you just see these little remnants, and it's just not good enough really. We need to fight for the green. And if you go out and look at these fungi and see them about this time of year now, after a good shower, you'll understand why I consider certain things a tragedy. Cheers.
Still before 7 o'clock on a Friday morning. Listen to that wind. Getting on my wiki to try and do these videos, but there you go, it's like an autumn day. And autumn is the time of fungi. And one of the places I go looking for fungi when I'm at work, have a quick hour's break, is St Paul's Church. Got these lovely lime trees, susurrating in the wind, and these lovely stretches of grass. So the root systems of the trees reach under the grass and they have a symbiotic relationship with a few fungi. So I get blushes on here, some Russula species, a few boletes, deceivers, Cortinarius, so lots of different fungi going on here. It's a nice area just to hang around, come and contemplate a few things in the quiet. And again, people just walk past and just miss out on these lovely things which are on your doorstep. Just in the Heatons, on a busy road, just in the background, you can just step in, have a look and just see what's going on. Around the other side of the church is another row of trees and lots of plant debris, and I've had a few things growing in there, and also a few insects knockabout, specklewoods, and there's a bug box around the other side. So again, it's another little area. Take time out in your busy lives, appreciate what's around you and try and put a little bit back. So St Paul's Church, Heaton Moor.
That's great. Thanks ever so much, Dave.
Cheers, man.
You've done another 3. We've stuck them on the YouTube channel. So if you would like to set off and have a look at them later after the event, please do so. They're just as interesting as his first 3, and they're just as enjoyable. So I'd like to thank everyone on the panels. I hope you've enjoyed yourself. I think it's been pretty good. I've enjoyed both Amelia and Dave's input, and Jeff's bat video was particularly good, I thought. Now, we have another weekend of fun and practical events starting on the 19th and 20th of September next weekend. So please go to www.heatons.org and book yourself in. If you've enjoyed yourself, please let us know, fill in the surveys. So what will we take away? Well, as you can see from the slide, there's a lot of things about transition, what it can do as a consumer, your voice as a citizen, and we've shared lots of ideas with you, and we'll continue to do that. And it's for you to get your voice out there and to share that with the councillors and people in power, because we've got to move this on. Okay, so thanks very much. As I say, fill in the surveys, and we'll see you soon. Goodbye.